Well, I haven't done a portrait in a long time, a self-portrait. This is from a photograph that I found. I like the lighting of it, so I chose it based on that and the mood I was in. The paints and the brushes, I used two number twos, like one fine and one wider, and a chisel tip number four, and Vasari oil paints that I got in Chelsea, Manhattan. So I started with the ink here. This took me 5 minutes because, well, I always rush. But I've I've used a different method for this than I usually do. You see, like I've marked the areas uh, that might have different colors. So I blocked in these sections for colors, and this is the first time in my art career that I did a portrait, especially a self-portrait, but any portrait, where I focused only on the colors and less on the line work and the proportions, which I feel like is my strength. And that's something I've been very conscious of lately as I've been doing more life drawing, that I feel like I've been relying on something that I'm good at, which is line work. I mean, coming from an animation background, I've done a lot of life drawing where, the focus is line and the outlines. So this, I've after observing some artists at a recent fair in New York, um, I I've always admired these super realist artists, and I thought, like, and to some extent, I mean, anybody can do anything. So that maybe that sounds weird, but anybody can do anything. And it's like I always thought, like, well, I guess that's what they're focused on, and I'm more of an illustrator. But I had to ultimately admit that I wasn't as um, I wasn't as strong at, like, just noticing color, and that this is my attempt, and you know I'm striving to be a master. It's Masterpiece Art School. I'm striving to be a master, and there's always things, admittedly, that I can learn. So anyway, so you see I've blocked in everything. I love this photograph because of this great light of the yellow beam that's coming in. And then there's kind of purples in the cheeks. So I'm not sure if in the end, like, I really got those right purples, uh, because I'm using, you see, the chisel tip number four Raphael brush, and I'm just rubbing off the paint and then dipping it in a new paint, and sometimes that influences the shade. So I'm working very quickly. This whole painting took 1 hour and 5 minutes with the ink work. So the ink work, I remember because I timed it, it's 5 minutes, and then this oil painting process took a full hour. It was like literally practically on the dot. Another thing that I'm doing different about my process that I should mention is, for the first time, I'm not using solvents. I'm using a medium, like a liquid type medium, for diluting the oil paint a little bit, but actually I had it put on that mixing board a while back, like, well, I think yesterday or the day before, so it kind of mostly dried up. So this is it's all kind of like a new process for me, and I'm kind of going after a style that I've seen that I love, which is like this rough, kind of unfinished, realistic painting style, but then very realistic as I can, and it's a very honest portrait. It's a self-portrait, but it's from a photograph, which is kind of easier actually it's harder in a way. I feel like from life, at least from life, you capture something more real, but from a photo, you kind of have to be very exact to have people admire it. Before I forget, also you saw that I've switched to the finer number 2 Raphael brush, and I've also got a wider number 2 that like is one of those Michaels brands, studio brushes. So this one here, it's wider. It's like a number 2, but I guess it's like the medium number 2. While it's like the Raphael is a fine number 2 brush. So I'm using the fine one. I can't help it use it for the fine detail because otherwise everything is too blurry. And here when I'm adding the ear, I have to go back in later and fix that because it's a little muddy and a lot of the detail is lost in the ear. The nose, it's weird when you get this angle of yourself and there's a thought that like I don't look like that. Like I thought I was better looking, or like you kind of notice all these different imperfections because we perceive ourselves kind of differently, I think. Well, I mean, sometimes beautiful people perceive themselves as really, really inferior, and sometimes unattractive people have more confidence, maybe a false confidence. So it was interesting choosing this angle, and it just captured my mood. And one little kind of artistic, personal thing I'd like to mention, because technically right now, actually this is an interesting part with the eyebrow. There's nice texture by the end of this in the eyebrow. So and this is where I add like the light nose, the neck, and then I go back in the ear, and I think I add some reds here, and that reds and purple mix, and that makes it pop a little bit. Yeah, there you go. See, now it's popping, the ear. Yeah. So, yeah, one thing that I've been ruminating on recently as an artist is why we're compelled to create art. This like why I was compelled to do the self-portrait today. So the reason was that it's so strange. I mean, I don't have it really defined, but basically I had commissions that were unrelated to this. It was like animation and illustrative work all week, and I could have been working on that. This was done in the evening, so I could have been working on that after dinner, and maybe I should have been, but I was like just kind of worn down about like the progress I was making on it, and I hadn't done anything for me in a long time, and I was just like, you know what, I'm going to take an hour and express how I feel. And this was the portrait that came out. I chose this picture. I had some other ones that were like kind of me smiling. I could have chosen something like, make it like an avatar and a nice painting of myself smiling at the camera or something. But this picture captured the mood, and it kind of has a story, like the fact that I'm looking down. And I was very happy that day. It was actually on my birthday. It was like at my birthday dinner with a bunch of friends around me. But there's something like, there's a deeper story there, I guess. I don't know, it's like caught in the moment, Like maybe I was like turning my head or something and they captured me. But so this it's got its own context basically. So, and it supplied what I needed to do something for myself that day that was like expressive of my feelings and trying something new as a personal growth, like trying a different technique of painting. So, you know, so now I'm like blending things. I think after I finish this, I do touch it up a little bit. So I always sign, and then after I sign, I notice a couple of more things. So you see the patches on my cheek, and even like the light on my head. I actually bring in some solid white to blend those in more like the way I do there. So yeah, here it is. I think I'm also going to add this to the free oil painting tutorial that I have at masterpieceartschool.com. So I'll add the link in the description.